Good morning, everybody. It's very excited to see you all here in our part 2 of the microbiome. I don't know what that is. The microbiome and diets and bowel nosode webinar. And today we're going to talk more about the bowel nosodes, or we're going to get into them. Yeah, I thought I'll just start with a little, well, maybe there's, whoops. I'll start with just a little summary of what we discussed last time, and we can see if there's any questions at that point. Let me just share my screen. Hold on, it's always a little. Let's see how it happens. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So last time we looked at how the healthy microbiome actually is key to our health, and how to eat healthily with that for having a good microbiome, which means a good health overall, and that there actually is no miracle diet. So something strange is happening. I don't see any of you. I just see my
Carla, I think
we
can see your whole screen, and there we go. You click the stop share. So
yeah. So you were not seeing me either? What were you seeing?
I was seeing you, but it was like I saw your whole screen, so I could see the background in the background and then some of the presentation. So I think you shared your whole screen instead of just the presentation.
Zoom changed just we got yesterday or the day before, right?
I know.
So
yes.
I bet you that's what it is. So they're doing
Yes.
things differently, and we haven't figured out how to do it. I'm going to try this again. Because usually it's you share your desktop. Let me try this again. Did it do the same thing? Is this better?
Perfect.
Oops. All right. Just go back. So yes, so the at least I see some of you now. That's great. So yeah, so we did a little bit, right? We had a nice, I felt, exchange around this whole idea of what's a good diet, and some of the myths that are going around in social media, and then sort of looking at kind of being conscious of what you're eating and what your cravings are, and that actually your microbiome might contribute to that. Like your bowel bacteria might actually determine what foods you reach out for, right? And today we'll see, like, I wrote in the little paragraph about today's webinar that in fact the bowel nosodes, which were sort of we could say discovered or started to be part of homeopathy about a century ago, and that really came out of some homeopaths seeing how people were reaching for different foods, different people, different foods, and look differently, different constitutions, and that all of that could relate to the bacteria that they found in their poop. They were totally interested, and so they would ask for samples of people, and then they would study those microbiologically, and then they made remedies out of these. So we'll look at those, but it's sort of interesting, like they already noticed, and it got studied and confirmed that yes, depending on your microbiome, you might be reaching out for things, and your microbiome might determine whether the food is going to be nicely metabolized, let's say, or that it's going to get stored and in liver and muscle cells and fat cells and contribute to obesity. So this is also, right, more and more known now that obesity and many other diseases are all based in the microbiome. But what's also coming out of all of this work and these studies is that really the diet is key for a healthy microbiome. And we saw that last time, and we saw that the importance were the high fiber foods, and that yes, some of them can cause gas, and so therefore this whole idea of microdosing, we discussed, how do you integrate that bit by bit. And I thought, our conclusion very nicely portrayed in one of Michael Pollan's books. I don't know if you know him. He's a journalist who's written quite a number of books, some of them related to food and eating. But really, it's the human and the natural world, let's say, many of them. But this book, if you can read it, like right around that, the lettuce head, it says, eat food, not too much, and mostly plants. I think that's the conclusion we had last time as well, right? So, so in part 2, what are we going to do in part 2? Well, I did have some requests to look a bit into fasting. So we'll talk about that and intermittent fasting. What's the research on that? And I did a little brief overview of the different kinds of diets and how we can evaluate them. The ones that we also talk about in both the foundation holistic nutrition basics and in the level 2 holistic nutrition counseling. There's a lot of handouts in those. We come back to, of course, the microbiome and as it links into the use of the bowel nosodes, which is a homeopathy's response, I would say, to the microbiome. All okay with that? Any? Yes? Okay. So as promised, a little bit on fasting. And I think there too, there's a lot of information and misinformation in social media. Of course, fasting, the word just means very simply abstinence from food or abstinence from both food and drink. And fasting can be done for all kinds of purposes, right? Traditionally, in terms of ceremonies, religious fasts, health reasons, ethical purposes, right? And many different reasons that people fast. And, we call our first meal of the day in English the breakfast, right? We're breaking our fast. We're breaking our overnight fast. And so for many people, probably a majority of people, this is probably a 12-hour fast that we do just automatically as part of our normal day, right? So occasional fasting has been practiced throughout many traditions around the world. And as I said, often as part of rituals or ceremonies to mark maybe the seasons or to mark stages of life. And we could look at it as a way of connecting to the non-material, to deeper parts of oneself, or connecting to one's community, because fasting when it is done in community setting or in religious settings. No? And I found this quote, like it's the pause button. Oops. Sorry about that. Like it's in a way, it's giving ourselves a break. It's a pause. So when we look around the globe, we see fasting as part of many traditions, as I said. And you probably are all familiar with the Ramadan, Yom Kippur, Lent, and also both the Hindu and Buddhist traditions have many different kinds of fasts. They're fast in native ceremonies. And each of these fasts, be they part of the yearly cycle or cycle of life, they have their own kind of set of, what do you eat, what do you not eat, when do you eat, when do you not eat, right? We could call those the rules. So, and when we are not preoccupied with food, which many of us in the Western world, we tend to be preoccupied a lot of the time. And when we're not preoccupied, we have time to focus our mind elsewhere, right? Focus our mind maybe outside, outward as well. Maybe on something more lofty, more spiritual, a bigger purpose, more communal, more for others. It really allows for time of reflection. And I found this quote very interesting. When you fast, you are sacrificing yourself for all, for your family, for your community, by denying yourself the basic comforts of shelter, water, nourishment, and companionship, because in First Nation communities, a fast often happens in isolation. So not only does the mind have space for an outward focus, the body gets a break as well, right? A pause from endless digesting, assimilating, excreting. And we could say there's a very old way of doing regular fasting or intermittent fasting, apart from this overnight fast, is a 1 day a week fast. And it's a common practice. It's a traditional naturopathic practice. We all, if we look at the Bible, where the seventh day was the day of rest, we could give a day of rest to our digestive system. And so, whatever day of the week that is, that can be a day of of drinking liquids, a hypotoxic soup. This is quite a common practice. And we even see, even in my own family tradition, I was thinking, yeah, we didn't cook on Sundays. We're Catholic background, and that was part of the thing, that it was a day off for my mom, a day of rest. And, a soup had been made on Saturday, and we would eat soup on the Sunday, and we'd eat bread and different things that didn't require cooking. But there is any kind of shift, of course, away from your regular eating habits, gives already a bit of a break to your digestive system. It changes things around. And of course, there are times in the year that it is maybe natural to do some fasting. And the very well-known time for that is, of course, the spring, right? So this is after your winter, where we need to help our bodies to sustain through cold seasons, the weather, and our energies are more focused on the essential organs. But when the spring comes and the energy kind of can move again, can move more outward, which we see also in nature, right? The maple starts to flow in the trees, right? Like when that juice comes back up in the tree, and that's also when in our bodies there is a time where it's very pertinent, and we have the support of our body to do a fast and to kind of get maybe rid of some excess metabolic waste that has been accumulated over the winter time. Another time that is also propitious also, a good time would be between summer and autumn. Again, it's a switch where the very intense energy of summer and lots of fresh foods that have been around, where we have to kind of prepare to go more inward and for the energy to go down. And this could be another time where we do a specific kind of help to adjust to that change of season. And in any diet simplification, the body goes into that sort of more release mode. Like I was saying, like even on the 1 day a week, whatever kind of simplification you do. So it wouldn't necessarily mean, if we do cyclical fasting, it wouldn't necessarily mean that we go on a water fast. I'll talk about that in a minute, but that's not necessarily not necessarily even good for everybody. The younger you are, the more your body can deal with that. But as we are aging and maybe some chronic issues settle in, some chronic disease issues, the body is going to need that energy. And so we would just simplify. We just eat greens and grains is what I always say, for that, like in the spring. It's the time when greens start to come up. They're sometimes a little bit bitter, which is really helpful for the liver, because it's time of the year in the cycle. It's also that time for renewal that the liver energy brings with it. And so any kind of green with any kind of grain, and then so you're getting away of the more difficult to digest foods, like the animal foods. Of course, anything that's processed, which is harder on our system. Foods that have been broken down to flour, for instance, like breads, right? They're all harder. So we just, maybe it's just 1 day, maybe it's 2 days, maybe it's 3 days, so it's really, each person is different. But that's one way of doing just really a simple fast. But more, a more stronger fast would be like a true fast, we could say, is when only water is consumed. So then all foods, all other drinks. I know sometimes now we can see on social media a true fast is you don't consume anything, even water, but that's not a good idea, because there still be metabolic waste that's going around, and the water is needed for it to be flushed out. And so the other thing that's really important with such a complete fast is that actually also give the body a rest. So it's not a time to do strong workouts. It's not a time, it's not a time to cook for your family. I had a person attempt a water fast once, and she was cooking for her family and they were eating around her. So not recommended. There are some centers, retreat centers, where you can do this, if you have the money, of course. But it's a time really for healing on all levels. You meditate, you reflect, write, you journal, and so they can be 3 days, 5 days. In some of those centers, they actually will accompany you for several weeks if you have something serious like cancer and your energy is okay, so a fast is doable for you, then this could be a very healing kind of moment in your process of dealing with cancer. Can't say that it will take the cancer away, but it will allow for a much better system overall, because it actually really is shown to support the immune system and help in chronic conditions. But all this to say is if the energy is good. If somebody has very low vitality, this is not a good idea, because there's not enough vitality to then change the body to start that healing process. So it's important, again, to be completely individualized about any of these things. And then there was, there's a lot of hype around intermittent fasting, or also called time-restricted eating. When you go and look for research on this, they use the word time-restricted eating, TRE. And as I was saying in the beginning, we sort of automatically have a time-restricted eating because we eat during the day and not during the night, unless we've got other things going on. But it's quite normal to have a 12 hours pause, let's say, and a 12 hours time within which you eat whatever meals you're eating. So I did look around and to see what the studies are saying about this. And I found some interesting things. First of all, what most people probably know about that is that I guess, especially in terms of cardiac diseases, but also diabetes and metabolic disorders, we're finding that doing a time-restricted eating, and now we're talking about less than 8 hours. So the eating happens within a framework of 8 hours, is beneficial. However, many of these studies are no more than 6 weeks. They've looked at this for 6 weeks. So this is like the Canadian Journal of Cardiology, like a poster that they brought out, to say how beneficial this would be. It helps with the body composition, better insulin sensitivity, etc. But these studies are not long-term studies. So yes, clearly, and this is what we see, and you probably read this in my handouts too, in the nutrition courses, that most diets can be really effective if they're done for a short term. And a 6-week period is, even for the most extreme diets, can still be quite beneficial, like the Pritikin, like the very low fat diets, or the very low carbohydrate diets, like the ketogenic diets. They can have some of these similar benefits that we see here, body composition, weight loss, insulin sensitivity, better glucose profile, so a decrease in diabetes and metabolic disorder, etc. Now, of course, it's kind of surprising, to see that when they look at that, and there's another, this is a more recent study even, where they actually did look over a 20-year period, but they look at that, they don't look at what the people are eating during this time. So it's sort of, so then you have, I guess you're wanting to see only what the time-restricted eating can contribute. And it would seem to me that sometimes the results are not conclusive because other factors are just as important, right? Or maybe the other factors are even more important, like what the person is eating in that time. So this one showing, quite the opposite effect, that this was a group of people, actually the whole group, it was a HANE, it's the abbreviation, but a study in the US over more than 20 years, where close to 40,000 people were followed in their eating habits. And they were asked in their first year that they joined the study, they were asked on 2 different days what their diet was like on that day. And so these where they had people that followed the diet or that were eating only less than 8 hours per day. Then looking 20 years later at all their various health outcomes of this group of people that's been being followed for 20 years, they were seeing that those that had this time-restricted eating actually had a higher risk of death. And I think we're going to hear more about this when they're going to pull this apart, because it feels to me like this is not a very sturdy study, given that they were looking at 2 days of self-report in hindsight. So the people were reporting on what they were eating and when they were eating it after the fact. And they did not take into consideration the various diets or the variant kinds of foods that people were eating. But anyways, all this to say that there is maybe not a long-term benefit of doing this really stringent, like less than 8 hours of eating in over a long period of time. So maybe short-term, that's okay. Long-term, maybe the 12 hours is actually a better time. 12 hours on, 12 hours off, obviously, but we know, all depending on what is being eaten and when those 12 hours are taking place. Because I don't think I've made a slide of that, but there was studies, sort of like a meta-analysis, where they looked at studies, both in animal studies and human studies. They looked at time-restricted eating as well as the Ramadan fasting, where the eating happens during the night and the fasting happens during the day. And they were looking at the effect on the microbiome in this case. And I was going somewhere with this. The conclusion was that, yes, they were seeing differences in terms of the microbiome, and in fact, more diversity, which we know from our last time together, that the more diverse the microbiome, the better it is equipped, right? But that, in fact, the biggest factor, the biggest impact was what the people were eating, and not as much the time restriction. So just, because there's so much hype about it, I thought it'd be interesting for us to look at that. And, obviously time restriction is important, but because we shouldn't be eating 24 hours, right? We already are way too much snacking and grazing and, never giving our digestive system a break. The nights we know are the time for the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, right? So the night is for not taking in more food. So yeah, so this, for me was then, okay, what are they looking at? What are what we call the endpoint in a study? What is being evaluated? And as I said already, the studies are not all that long, except for this longitudinal one, which was over 20 years. So, are they looking just at a particular outcome like cholesterol or insulin resistance or glucose? They're looking at weight loss. Are they looking at the microbiome composition? So all of these things are going to determine how we should understand the study, right? And what importance it brings to us. Yeah, and then, the same is then for us, like when we evaluate the diets, what do we evaluate, like what is our endpoint, let's say, because we look at various popular diets in both, as I said, the Holistic Nutrition Basic and that Holistic Nutrition Counseling in level 2, and comparison. The one aspect, of course, because many of these diets were created as part of weight loss, the desire for people to lose weight, right? And we live especially in the Western world, a society that has problems with that, where there is a lot of excess, or we would say people with obesity, and therefore with health problems that relate to that, like cardiovascular, metabolic, like diabetes, etc. So it's a valid reason to want to look at a diet, and so these diets that are being proposed, well, how should we look at that? And I thought it was interesting. I just came across an article from the American Heart Association, AHA, looking at the same diets that I talk about in the documents, but giving them points in terms of cardiovascular health. And I think that should be, oh yeah, no, that's not, it's going to come. It's on the next slide after this. So we already know that any extreme diet is not sustainable over the long term, like the Pritikin, very low fat diet. Eventually, a person is going to get irritable, and they're going to swing to the other side, right? And like we get an energetic swing, and they're going to eat and going to gain the weight back. Like this is what we see, right? In the whole issue around dieting for weight loss is that people swing up and down in terms of their weight. So the other, of course, extreme diet that the American Heart Association doesn't talk about, but I talk about it in my book, is the complete raw food diet, because that's also an extreme diet. You could get very, if we talk about it energetically, you get very chilly from that, right? And then again, there is a swing that would happen, and or either the swing will happen or the person will get sick, even though the diet did initially help them with whatever reason they were taking it. So that's, that's the issue of extreme diets. We already know that. And we also know that any diet with emphasis on plant food is going to be a good diet if it's not extreme, if it's not excluding too many things, and the person can maintain it. It will bring a lot of benefits that we don't find in animal foods, like the phytochemicals, which are such a broad range of effects in our bodies that are helpful, and the fibers, of course, that especially are needed for the gastrointestinal tract and for our friends in our microbiome. And then, of course, also, we know that the less processed food is within a diet, the more fresh, the more variety, the more really cooked from scratch, the better, the more benefits there are. So in our evaluation, we would look at that too, right? How much of it is a diet telling you, to buy these and these prepared foods. Now, it doesn't mean that we should never eat prepared foods, and that we need to also sometimes find some balance in spending time away from the kitchen, but there's room for everything, but in moderation, and we would keep the focus on the freshness. So and then also better for our digestion, of course, is the simpler the meal, the better, and the foods traditional to your culture, right? Like I talked about that, I think, last time, right? So in my descendants, it's rye is the grain, you know, so I do very well with rye, whereas I don't do well with wheat, you know. With Scottish descendants, it's the oats, the grain. So, you know, Asian, it would be possibly rice if it's China, or sorghum, or you know, other grains, right? So around the world we have our traditional grains, for example. Okay, so here's that little chart that I then made up. So they divided it in 4 categories, and you know, it's interesting to see that in their best, you know, the top category, of course, is the Mediterranean diet, which I think in general by dietitians, more conventional, let's say, the medical system is the one that would be sort of the clearest, coming out of studies and really long-term follow-ups, that it's sustainable as a diet, and it really does provide a good balance, and therefore good, you know, health contributions, right? Now DASH is really specific for the heart, right? It's a low sodium diet, but it's very much like a Mediterranean kind of diet, you know, but with less salt. Then pescatarian is plant foods with fish, and vegetarian plant foods with possible egg and or dairy. And so that group of diets, and I think we can elaborate on that, you know, with other traditional diets, like Asian traditional diet, for example, where it's also the focus is on plant foods, that they can be sustained long term, and they, you know, provide a lot of health benefits. Then in that second group would be the ones where there is maybe some attention required if you want to be keeping it long term, like the vegan diet, where there is only plant food. There could be concern over vitamin B12, and so the person would need to be aware of that. Or not an extreme low fat, but a general low fat diet. The problem there is that it often means that then the person's going to get their calories from high carb foods, including sugar foods. So it would have to be very aware. I don't particularly feel that it has been shown that low fat is beneficial health-wise. And you know, with low fat, we would not eat as many nuts as maybe would be good for our health, because nuts provide so many good fatty acids, or the healthy oils, like olive oil, right, which is well known for bringing down cholesterol and helping cardiac health. So, but for the American Heart Association, it's in their tier 2. And then most of the other really popular diets fall in their tier 3 and 4. And, you know, so they're okay in the short term. So the very low fat would be the Pritikin. The low carbs would be like just the beach, you know, what are all these very popular diets, right? And then up to the extremes there, the ketogenic and the Paleolithic, where the emphasis on animal foods is so intense, is so much bigger, that they can really only be good in a very short time, like let's say 6 weeks. Like the ketogenic, I know I promote that at certain points, because it's one of the only diets that can switch that metabolism around. Like if somebody is in this cycle of being overweight and risking diabetes, like, or maybe already having some symptoms of that, the ketogenic diet can switch that around. However, it's what you do after that. So it's, let's say it's the 6 weeks, it requires about 6 weeks for the metabolism to switch. But then whatever the person does after that, like, are they going to go to one of those well-balanced diets, or are they just going to go back into bad habits of, they should stay, of course, in those cases, they should increase really just with plant foods and not with sugar foods and things like that when they come off the extreme low carb. So yeah, so that's a little, I thought was fun to try and to represent the different diets this way. So, oh, it's South Beach. No, it just came in my mind, the name for that. But anyway, I thought maybe to represent it a little bit like this could be an interesting little overview. Are there any questions, comments? Yes, Lucia, pasta. Yes, so most of the Mediterranean heritage, they do okay with wheat because that's an area where that was originating, right? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Any questions, comments before we go on back to the microbiome?
Yeah, I have a question, Carla. We talked about we talked about the 8-hour and the 12-hour. Can you clarify that a little bit? The 8-hour intermittent and the 12-hour. I didn't understand.
Okay. Yes. So sorry, I was just assuming that everybody knew what is meant here. So yeah, it's a cyclical eating of having periods without any food or drink except for water, and the period of food. So if we say the 12 hours, it's 12-12. So 12 hours fasting, 12 hours eating. If
because I
was 8,
yeah.
So the 8 is you do your eating within that 8-hour time frame, and you have a 16-hour time frame of fasting. Now, some people do this where they start eating at between 12 noon and 8 p.m. And a more sort of probably more aligned with the cycle in your body would be to start to do an 8-hour from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. But we have a culture of dinners and family dinners and all of that, right? So that's where that one comes from.
I just had one specific question. Like, for instance, for myself, I am not eating from, let's say, 7 o'clock at night to 10 in the morning, which is a little more than 12 hours. And then I don't eat anything till 5 o'clock. So because I'm not doing
2 meals.
Yeah, 2 meals a day.
Yeah, that's fine.
That would be okay.
Yeah,
that would be considered intermittent.
Yeah, so your intermittent would be, you have like I guess that's almost a 14 or 15-hour fast, and then you have your 2 meals.
That's
and yeah, and I'm finding with some of my clients too that they do best on a 2 meal a day diet. And if we think about the agriculturers in many cultures, agricultural workers, the farmers, they live on a 2 meal day, right? They have one in the beginning of the day and then one at the end of the end of their work day. So there's nothing wrong with a 2 meal day. And yeah, I don't know where the 3 meals, where that originated, but which is also fine, of course.
But the plant food diet yeah, sorry, the plant food diet would be grains and plants, right? Or one should have absolutely no grain. Like, would plants mean?
Okay,
Yeah.
plants mean grains. Grains are for grounding. Now, when you have a when you have a dysbiosis, let me just show this picture, right? When you have a dysbiosis, you have inflammation. These little red things there. I don't know if you this and this is the lining. This should be a nice barrier between the hollow part of your intestine and the lining, and then the rest of your body, right? And anything that comes into your digestive system should actually be absorbed by the cell and then, right, metabolized, assimilated, etc., and go to the right place where it needs to go. So what we see with dysbiosis is that the microbiome, partly because dysbiosis means it's out of balance, right? So that some components in the microbiome, they're starting to consume the mucus from the membrane. And we get a compromised barrier, like there's openings. And so molecules can actually move through that, which is causing problems, including allergies or intolerances. And many of the grain intolerances that we're seeing is because of this dysbiosis. So when somebody says, I can't eat any grain, you know, all of them, they will cause bloating, gas, pain, cramping, maybe skin reaction, maybe whatever because it can cause other things. We're looking at dysbiosis and we need to work here. We need to work in the intestinal tract. That's where the issue is. And I agree. I'm seeing here, the discussion about gluten and the discussion about wheat. And so that's the issue there. That's the issue when we talk about wheat and when we talk about gluten.
So is this when somebody is getting a lot of itching and all of that and eczemas, would that likely point towards a grain allergy or a grain causing it?
Not necessarily, because the other, so gluten is a protein, right? The other proteins that can be very difficult for people is casein, which is the protein in cheese. Well, milk has both, has both albumin and casein. The albumin is a more common, it's also closer to the human molecules, protein molecules, but casein is a huge molecule, and it's specifically, it's very, it's the cow's milk is very high in it, more even than so the bovine milk. And so bovine protein difficulties can also be an issue here.
And is the liver implicated? Is the liver implicated in this at all?
So what happens then is that anything after this barrier is going to be to some extent compromised and not getting the food presented to them in the way that they should. Now, the liver is also implicated in many of our lives, in many of us, because we consume too much sugar, too much processed food, and, maybe we don't eat enough bitter, or maybe we don't eat according to the seasons sufficiently, and we get clogged up. And we talk about that, we use that word with the liver, right? It gets clogged up. Well, what are we saying is that it's not able to go through its own clearing cycle, which the liver does, and therefore doesn't function as well as it could, right? The liver is the place where we have all of the what do you call that? all of the detox pathways. So it's full of antioxidants normally. And so that it can detox the pro-oxidants, right? And so when the liver can't do that properly, we have, we get that, a holding on to components, to molecules, to waste that then can trigger all kinds of further problems. And so, yes, the liver is really important here too. And the other thing that I think might be interesting for you to reflect on is that you all know about reflexology, right? You all know about points in our hands and feet that reflect to other parts of our body. Well, we actually have reflex points in the large intestine. And the reflex points, so here is this little image of the large intestine. So we, depending on where the issue is of possible inflammation, of maybe waste that has gotten stuck to the lining, right? Like, we are also a society with a lot of constipation, and to the constipation, not meaning you only that you can't have a bowel movement, but that there is an irregularity in your bowel movements, and there is a tendency of stool to get stuck up against the lining of the large intestine. So where those things happen, there can be any kind of problem. So be it allergies, be it sinusitis, be it eczema, be it headaches, right? So all of these, so it's the microbiome, it's the large intestine, it's the liver. They can all be implicated there.
So the
Absolutely.
liver remedies would help. Liver remedies or detoxification would help then.
So
Yeah.
there's in my practice, where I of course was first trained as a naturopath, before being trained as a homeopath and being trained as a traditional French naturopath, right? Which, the European way of doing naturopathy, which is very holistic. Let's just simplify to make the difference with the North American naturopathy. We start with always assuming that there is work to be done on the microbiome, that there is a dysbiosis, and that there is work to be done on the liver. So we'll always start. And this doesn't necessarily need to be very involved, very difficult, very complicated, It really depends on the situation, right? But as I was, the earlier slide about that, the simple food, the simple meal, that already starts a detox of the liver when you're eating the greens. And maybe you're not eating it with grains, maybe you're eating it with mung beans. It's another one of my favorites to help, because I have not come across anybody yet who has a reaction to that. So when you prepare them the way that we talked about it last time, right? And Jennifer, the video of last time is available, right? You'll be able to watch it if you want,
And this is the green mung beans.
Yeah.
Green beans.
Yeah, the green mung beans. Yes, yeah. Mung or mungo, or they're different, but they're traditional beans. It's a very small bean, and when you properly prepare it, like we discussed last time, it can bring out all of its benefits without causing you any difficulty in the digestion. And it is the kind of bean that helps the liver, and it helps the intestinal tract in terms of dysbiosis. Yeah. So
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. I see there, some things are being discussed here in the chat. That yes, we can start the causal factor with the wheat, or we can start it with our whole dietary habits having changed so much, you know. But it is true that, and it's understandable, but it is true, the wheat that we're eating now is not the traditional wheat. The wheat that we are eating now is, you know, yearly there's new hybrids, and it is very much like hybridized and created to have more nutritional value, and nutritional value measured in protein levels, and the protein in the wheat is gluten. So the gluten level in wheat is so much higher than the traditional level of gluten in the traditional wheat, or the heritage grains like kamut and spelt, which are from that same family as wheat. So yeah, you know, is that the cause? Is that just one of the factors? But it does mean that many people are intolerant to it. However, when we work with people, yes, it's okay for them to be either wheat-free or wheat, spelt, and kamut-free diet, or even a gluten-free diet for a period of time. They need to get back to those foods. You know, the aim is that that's not a permanent diet, because that's not a sustainable diet. Grains are for grounding. Those people will miss a certain aspect of what's required to have balanced health. I've got two people with questions here, Rachel and then Sophie. Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
I just want to say that it's been stressed over the past maybe 20 years or 25 years, or even more than that. I'd say maybe 30 years, where it's been stressed. We get these commercials on TV, we get all this literature about how people should be eating 3 meals a day, and that it's so important that people have such a very big breakfast with, you know, loads of stuff. So the idea that I think that that's one of the things that has brought that you need 3 meals a day. I don't know why they stress this out. I don't know who it is that's been stressing it out. I don't know who pays for the commercials or the literature or what have you. But it's something I noticed because of I had young children, and that was the thing. If you need to go, you bring them to school, they have to have a very big lunch. If they don't, they can't learn appropriately. They don't learn what they're supposed to learn in the time that they learn it. And so there's that whole thing about, you know, eating 3 big meals, and especially the you know, like especially for kids. And I don't know if that was one of those things where why that was brought about, because it's is there anything that really stresses that out? Are there studies that say that that's a better thing? And for the casein thing, I was milk intolerant for a long time until I did the A2 instead of the A1 where there was that mutation, the spontaneous mutation in Holstein milk and Ayrshire milk that I cannot absolutely have at all, because my gut will just go berserk. But I can now have all of the milk, yogurt, whatever, cheese, and drink the milk without a problem with Jersey cow milk, which is the A2, which is the heritage milk that we used to have in the day, and that have not gone through the mutation, the A1, A2 mutation. So I don't know. There must be something there too. And the A1, A2 mutation, the casein is so big that it just rams into the intestine. And I've seen more and more people have that intolerance, and that when switched to the A2 milk don't have that. So I don't know if that has something to do with the same thing as the wheat, where, you know,
Yeah,
there was so much.
of course. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you know, we're mammalians, and it's a mammalian milk. So there's, you know, but as adults, we don't drink our breast milk from our moms, you know, so there is also something there, right? Like, but around the world, around the globe, in traditional societies, that milk from their whatever mammalian animals they would have around, they would they would keep it in various forms, right? Like whether they be cheeses, whether they be yogurts, kefirs, and all the various fermented products, just to be, and adults were consuming those. Let's quickly go because I see that we're already at 12 and I still haven't done the bowel noses. I haven't talked about them. So
I'm sorry, can you just like really quickly address this question in the chat about at-home microbiome tests and whether they're, what you think of them?
So from what I'm reading about the microbiome and health is that it's very difficult to put the, let's say, the more positive microbiome on any particular bacterium. And so, yeah, this is as much as I can say. So what those tests, I have not looked at them, what those tests exactly would test. We know there's a few bacteria like Akkermansia, like that they say, okay, if you have that, that's, you know, you protect it against a number of different diseases. I've never been somebody to send off for tests, you know, like naturopaths, lots of naturopaths do. I've never been one for that. I've always gone on symptoms. And we know that even for anything, like even vitamin deficiencies, mineral deficiencies, it's the symptoms that are there that are much more reliable than any laboratory test. And so I would assume that that would be the case for this as well.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you. Is it okay to ask a question right now, or do we need to rush through and ask at the end?
The floor is yours.
Okay, awesome. So I was just wondering, because I cannot eat gluten. I haven't been able to eat gluten for about 9-10 years. And that was noticed on a ALCAT food test that my body goes into a super inflammatory state when I eat gluten. And so I stopped eating gluten. I do okay as long as I don't eat gluten. I know that it's related to leaky gut, and I haven't been able to heal that completely yet. But in my thinking, because the gluten that's available in the United States is not the natural organic type of gluten, like it's not natural to our planet. It's been changed. It's like you were talking about. So therefore, because it's not natural to our planet, it's not natural to us as an organism. So if the natural gluten is not available where we live, then would it really be something that you do want to put in your body? Because even if I was able to heal my gut, which I should do, and hopefully I'll get down to the bottom of all of this with my homeopathic work on myself through school. But even if I was able to heal my gut, do I want to put that inorganic type of gluten that's been treated in that not natural way into my system? Because that would probably cause an issue in my system again after I had already healed it. And I could see how you're saying that we're missing part of the holistic thing that we're supposed to have as a human being, because wheat is something that's natural to our planet. But if that natural wheat's not available, maybe it's better not to take that.
Yeah, I was saying, depending on our heritage, it may be wheat, it may be oats, it may be rye, it may be barley, it may be, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think we're all supposed to eat gluten, or we're all supposed to eat wheat. I'm not certain. And I agree that the wheat that's available to us, even if it's organically grown, it's been, you know, it's been manipulated. So it's no longer the original traditional. And so some people then do well with kamut. So that would be the traditional one. In the wheat line of things. And but what I'm saying is grains. So grains also include, of course, the non-gluten grains like rice and corn and millet and quinoa, right? Buckwheat. And so, yeah, so we need grains. That's all I was saying there.
Thank you.
And yeah, that's, so I don't think you need particularly gonna need wheat ever, you know, like maybe that will never be the grain for you, but maybe some other ones will.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think I just misunderstood, so I'm glad I asked that question. I had one more question, if it's okay. I was wondering, if something gets to a level of physical manifestation in your body, so like you've got some striving, you're trying to meet some ideal, and it causes you to change the way you eat, change the way you act in your life. And then it leads to something like leaky gut, and then you get a gluten allergy. So like, if it's gotten to a physical level, does it require some sort of physical intervention? Or can you just, if you find that one perfect homeopathic remedy for that core remedy, do you just take that and then wait for time to pass for your physical body to catch up? Because your physical manifestation is the last thing to manifest the healing. Do you just wait, or does it require a physical intervention because it's gotten to that physical level?
Now, this is a huge question. And you're just in the beginning of your learning at Mish, and the core homeopathic remedy that addresses where the organism is living the most stress can sometimes do everything that's needed to be done, and other times not. And you know, and other times it may need other homeopathic remedies. It may definitely always look at the diet. It might need other interventions, right? So, but definitely where the stress is in the organism, that's what the core remedy will address. And we've had cases, you know, within our community where cancer was cured with one single homeopathic core remedy. It's kind of like a miracle. It doesn't happen very often, but it happens. And when it happens, we're all paying attention because nothing else could do that, right? It's really only homeopathy that can do that. But there's also many cases where that's not what's happening, right? And so you know, it remains a mystery to me to a certain extent. And so this, like, let's just quickly, this is where these bowel nosodes come in, because they are, you know, like nosode, that word nosode is a particular, you know, our remedies are coming out of nature, right? And, you know, you're Jennifer, I'm talking to you as well because you're just starting out. So we've got plant remedies, we've got animal remedies, and within animal remedies, we have remedies made out of diseased tissue or out of bacteria. And those are called nosodes. Okay, it's a particular group. And any, you know, it's a huge group. There's lots of them. And we use them quite a lot in conjunction with that core remedy. There are some nosodes we really use as a core remedy, but we often will use nosodes, and bowel nosodes being specific in that. We use them in complement to a core remedy. And so this is for that whole process to take place, right? That's one of the areas where we find help. And so the bowel nosodes, even though they've been around for about 100 years, they don't have a proving, like, you know, which is sort of strange, right? Because provings is the way that we show in homeopathy what a remedy can address. And there's only one that was ever proven, that I have here, Proteus, was proven in 2018. So we can find the proving notes for that. And it actually, the proving of Proteus actually confirmed what was clinical. So all the other things that we know about the bowel nosodes is clinical information, comes out of the clinic. What got cured, what symptoms got resolved. And so the Proteus basically, the proving actually confirmed that, the clinical information that we had was correct. It confirmed its picture, its remedy picture. So if we don't have a proving, and therefore we don't really feel that we've got that whole picture, we don't use them as core remedies, right? I have not come across a time that a bowel nosode was used as a core remedy. But they are used in this kind of way. So all of you are further ahead, you know this. A rubric, let's say, the never well since, like the person never got over a particular thing, whether it was an infection or they took antibiotics. Those are times for bowel nosodes. It never completely came back after that. Or, as we said, the dysbiosis, right? Any kind of fatigue, debility, toxicity, I would say, or any kind of gastrointestinal symptoms, right? Gas, pain, cramping. So systems like the skin, the gastrointestinal, urinary, respiratory, if they're very prominent in the problem. So like what you were saying, Jennifer, that comes out all on the skin. It's all eczema, right? That's the result. Let's say the end result of the problem. So there you'll see in the various bowel nosodes as one with particular action on the skin. And when the generals, so the general discomfort, body odor, like, problems with wound healing, vulnerable to infection, these are sort of general symptoms that are in the whole body. That could be another sort of indication that maybe a bowel nosode is needed. So it's rarely a core remedy. And so then we use it as an intercurrent, meaning we have given the core remedy and a certain time passes and then we do bowel nosode. And we don't do them at the same time. So we do then bowel nosode. I'll tell you in a minute various ways that they get done. And then, which is then chosen, because there's not too many of them, but you choose them based on the picture that's in front of you, the patient. And only then after you're completing that particular treatment, be it three doses, be it 21 doses, you go back to core remedy. Or maybe you retake the case and maybe it's a different core remedy. Or you use them in a complex. So you all know that I love the HTSF complexes, Homéopathes Terre Sans Frontières, the Homéopathes Without Borders. It's a Canadian organization that I've been volunteering with for many years now. And basically all the bowel nosodes are somewhere in one of the complexes. So this is what you see also on the cheat sheet that I made, the little chart, right? Usually the potency that is used, if they're used on their own, it's 30 CH. But any potency can be used, and the ones that the potency that is used in the complexes is more often 18 CH, because it balances better with the other potencies of the remedies that are in there. So it's HTSF, I mean. But we can give them at 1,000, we can give them at 10,000, we can give it at where we feel that the energy is in the person. So we don't have to stick to the 30 CH potency. But here's two very famous homeopaths that work a lot with bowel nosodes and that teach about them, and this is their way. I followed the 3 doses in 12 hours and waiting. I've never seen that was sufficient. But if a patient is extremely sensitive and they react very quickly, then that's the way that I would do it. Otherwise, I would do the 1 dose daily for 21 days. And it's more my common way that I prescribe them, or in the HTSF complexes, which is another one. So you all have the document because I can just send it over the chat. Let me just do that. For those of you who don't have it, you can just download it from the chat. And all right. So I made this little document. I'm just gonna share it with you on here, so we can look at it. Just make it a little bigger. And basically, my intention was for the whole community, like not just for this webinar, of course, was to have something where we feel the kind of energy of the nosode. So it's got a first word in bold because that's kind of summarizing what it does, and then it's bringing together information from quite a lot of different homeopaths who've taught about this, as well as from Martin Jourde from the HTSF about each of them. And so they, in a way that they can help when you feel like, okay, there is a particular, there is an issue that I feel the bowel nosode will address. How do you then make a choice? And one of the things in their history of how they were discovered, developed by Bash and Patterson is that they had observed that if they gave, let's say, lycopodium to a person, like a common homeopathic remedy, that person would excrete a particular kind of microbe from in their stool. So this is the looks like or related remedies, okay, that are here. So for those of you who are already homeopaths, this can be helpful in making a choice, because you can see, okay, this person did well on, like, let's say lycopodium, and there's even more lycopodium, and we're dealing with, some inflammation, fullness, all this 4 to 8, like the lycopodium symptoms. They did well, but it didn't conclude the case. Then you might consider the Morgan Gardner, for example, right? So it can help, like you're just putting those similar remedies there might help you in also making your choices. That's why they're there. Yeah, the ones that I wanted to draw your attention to, I know I'm going terribly over time. I hope you don't mind. One of them I want to draw your attention to is Colibacillinum. So Colibacillinum probably reminds you of a microbe that you're quite familiar with, right? E. coli. Okay, so this is the homeopathic form of E. coli. And E. coli is a very common bacteria. It's normal in your intestinal tract. It may cause trouble when it enters your bladder, and it may be part of creating bladder infections. We're seeing a evolution of the E. coli in terms of around the world, in terms of it changing and becoming a bit more aggressive. But it's it can be often a helpful bowel nosode, especially if somebody is extremely tired on all levels, so including forgetful, including confused, even as far as the brain is not working so well anymore, like getting Alzheimer's or even schizophrenia like symptoms. And And we find it in my favorite HTSF complex, which is called HTSF intox. And which is a complex that, to be honest, many a time I start the treatment with patients, you know, when we talked about, like, do we do a detox? Do we do some kind of a fast? When somebody starts to work with us, like, what do we do? And often the HTSF intox is part of what I do at that time with that person. And part of what that is it helps then any kind of, you see here, dragging digestive and urinary troubles. So with that extreme tiredness, there are there are digestive problems, the person not digesting properly, it's slow, they might become constipated. There might be an alternation with diarrhea, etc. The overall fact that there is so much asthenia, meaning such deep tiredness in all parts of the body, right? Not just a feeling tired. And you see here too, like, it links to some remedies that we know are also very core in trying to move an organism out of a stuck system. And so now we're talking more about the body and body being stuck in psychosis, right? In the miasm part. And like with Tuya and Metarinum, for example. So if you think about that, you see that it's something very common in our society, partly because of our lifestyle, partly because we get so many medical interventions, you know, so they can bring in that type of slowness and tiredness, let's say, and accumulation, like in the miasm, the psychosis miasm. But anyway, so this is a very core one in terms of the bowel nosodes. And just as a complement to that is where the organism is not assimilating properly. This can be right from birth, right? In childhood, when there hasn't been a good entry into this world. I was going to show you a little baby's case, but we won't have time for that. But where Gardner was one of the remedies that that worked, and that faulty assimilation can go as far as celiac, which is extreme gluten intolerance, and dairy intolerance, right? The casein intolerance. And so, so this is another really important bowel nosode in our world, in our society. And guess what? It's also in that HTSF intox. So you can just imagine why this is my favorite of all the complexes. I think I showed you last time, but you know, a good way of starting let me just go back to my presentation. A good way of starting again, this is the case. I'm going to show that. Hold on. I'm going to stop the share. I'm just going to get this at the right spot. Okay. Now it can move. I love it when these things don't work the way you want them to work. Oops. No, it didn't move. No, I don't want to go there. Go back. Go back. Okay. So here you have the HTSF intox. So apart from those two bowel nosodes, obviously there are a few other complexes, a few other core single remedies in there. It's a good place to start. And the HTSF drain, which does, like the name says, it has a drainage. It works on the liver and on the kidneys in that way. Of course, they're homeopathic remedies, so it's very gentle. And these two complexes can be taken together. And one way, therefore, to start is to take them, say, 5 days out of each week, Monday to Friday, for 3 weeks at a time. And they will, they will change something. They will do something. They will shift something in your case. And a good time to take them is between 8 and 9 in the evening. Now, this is an important time for remedies in general, because that's the evening, and the night is the time of repair. And of course, we know from Chinese medicine that the liver time it starts at 11, liver gallbladder, and runs until 3 a.m. So we are also supporting that regeneration of the liver energy, and so we feel like it's a really good time for any core remedy to be taken, but for these particular two complexes, it's also a really good time to take them. So I'm gonna end it with that. And maybe if there are some questions, we can spend some time, but I know I went lots of overtime. Thank you for your attention and staying around.